Oh, great. Okay, fabulous. All right, I'm going to start now. I'm going to minimize you guys, so just send something in the chat if something goes wrong. All right. Thank you all so much for joining me. It's been a really long journey, and I'm delighted to share a little bit of my dissertation with all of you today, which James just shared the title of. So Tantra of the Sun is the title of a Buddhist scripture or a Tantra that I analyzed for my dissertation and also translated. But to tell you the story of how I began this dissertation project, I think I have to backtrack in time first. So in 2018, while living in Kathmandu, Nepal, I attended a 10-day ceremony headed by Sangye Nyempa Rinpoche on the left at the Benshin Monastery. And the ceremony was for the oral transmission and empowerment of a textual collection called the Fourfold Heart Essence. So for practitioners of the tradition of Buddhism called Heart Essence Great Perfection, receiving this transmission is extremely important. After initiation, we are allowed to read the contents of the scriptures and to take up its associated forms of practice. But at the time that I received this transmission, I had no idea what was in the collection. And I found out that despite the importance Fourfold Heart Essence has to contemporary Buddhist practitioners, not many people actually have systematically studied the contents of this collection. And this led me on my journey to discover more. And just in the photo, my mom is on the right there. Today is her birthday also. Happy birthday, Mom. In the second year of my PhD, when my advisor, James Gentry, joined Stanford, I finally purchased the collection Fourfold Heart Essence, which you will see here consists of 13 different volumes of Tibetan scriptures called pechas, these long rectangular form scriptures. And here's a picture of what it looks like inside, 2 pages, front and back. Now within Fourfold Heart Essence, it was compiled by a figure named Longchenpa, who is a prolific scholar and yogi at a critical time in the 14th century in Tibet, when Tibet was undergoing a civil war and the entire religious landscape was shifting. So there are some scholars who hypothesize that Longchenpa was actually trying to save this tradition, Heart Essence, from falling into obscurity, as the tradition had come under attack from many Orthodox Buddhist institutions. Within this giant textual collection, there are 2 main Heart Essence streams. Heart Essence of Vimalamitra, so named after the 8th century translator, Indian translator named Vimalamitra, who traveled to Tibet, and Heart Essence of the Dakini. Dakini really means something like feminine, enlightened, non-human being, to put it shortly. And what's interesting about these 2 Heart Essence streams is that they share a scriptural basis of the 17 tantras. These are 17 different texts that were preached by Buddhas to different audiences. But in the Heart Essence of the Dakini, it not only contains the 17 tantras, but an 18th tantra called the Tantra of the Sun, which is my dissertation topic. So Tantra of the Sun became the major source text for this second tradition. The distinctive to both the Tantra of the Sun, this source scripture, and the Heart Essence cycle it spawned, the Heart Essence of the Dakini, is the elevation of the feminine. So for one, in the traditional histories of the Heart Essence of the Dakini, we find for the very first time a Tibetan woman, Geshe Tsogyal, and a Tibetan princess, Pema Sel, as the primary characters of the transmission history. I just want to say I didn't find any pictures of Princess Pema Sel. This is something I found online. I can't substantiate it at this point. The story goes that at the height of Tibet's imperial empire in the 8th century, Padmasambhava, who was a tantric practitioner from Odiyana, or what scholars believe to be modern-day Pakistan, was invited to Tibet by King Trisong Detsen. And when the king's daughter, Princess Pema Sel, died at the age of 8, the king was grief-stricken. Padmasambhava revived the princess from the dead and transmitted to her his most prized teaching, the Heart Essence of the Dakini. And he made a prophecy that in a future life, when the time was right, and the Tibetans would be more receptive to this new Heart Essence cycle, the princess would be reborn and discover this treasure. So then Padmasambhava and Geshe Tsogyal teamed up, and they committed the heart essence of the Dakini and the 18 Tantras into writing and buried them in caves. 6 centuries later, the princess reincarnated, this time as a man named Pema Ledritzel, and this man, Pema Ledritzel, revealed the treasure, heart essence of the Dakini in 1313. And Longchenpa, who we saw on the previous slide, compiled Fourfold Heart Essence, claimed to be the next reincarnation of the princess after Pema Ledritzel. So after the princess, the most important reincarnations were all men. What is extremely unique about the Tantra of the Sun, the source scripture for heart essence of the Dakini, is that it is the first of its genre to feature an all-female cast. So it's a female Buddha, Samantabhadrī, you see on the left there, meaning kind of all good one, speaking to a group of Dakinis. To the right here, you can see what they look like. The middle one is Vajravarahi, also the primary interlocutor within the Tantra between Samantabhadrī and Vajravarahi. The contents of the scripture cover a number of philosophical topics, such as the origin of samsara, sentient beings, and the path of practice a practitioner must take up in order to achieve full liberation. So given what the tradition says about the Tantra of the Sun, I approach my dissertation with 2 major questions. One, why is the Tantra of the Sun a pivotal scripture for the emergence of this second heart essence stream, heart essence of the Dakini? So this work actually involved determining first which version of the Tantra was the one cited throughout the heart essence of the Dakini, as there are currently 4 different versions that I found in existence. And I settled on 113 chapter 1, which seemed to be the one quoted throughout the heart essence of the Dakini. The second question is, how does heart essence literature vis-a-vis the Tantra of the Sun as a case study understand and engage with notions of time? So I'll explain this. A theme that emerged early on in my study of these materials revolved around questions of time. I was struck immediately by the temporal nature of the language that characterizes my textual materials. So the rhetoric of immediacy, spontaneous expressivity, primordial purity, all rooted in a kind of timeless time, was always paradoxically juxtaposed with the language of straying, wandering, and samsara, or moving into cyclical time. So just as with gender, I felt there was something there to theorize on more broadly with time. But I have to say, even though I'm interested in how time and gender interplay in these early heart essence materials, I recognize that another scholar would likely implot or structure the story of the Tantra of the Sun differently, which I fully welcomed. And in terms of methods, I engage in close reading, translations, comparison, historical analysis, intertextual searches, and digital humanities, one project which I will share with you all today. To give you a bird's eye view of my dissertation structure, it is in 3 acts. So Act 1 is a history and context setting the stage for the Tantra of the Sun. Notably, in Chapter 2, I analyze the lineage histories of the heart essence of the Dakini, and also the conception of history more generally as it was understood in the heart essence tradition. And this chapter also sheds light on the human figures involved in the transmission of the heart essence of the Dakini up to the 14th century. So then chapters 3 and 6 are a deep dive into close study of the Tantra itself, highlighting its themes, structure, and content in comparison with other earlier heart essence literature to determine both its context of production, how it emerged, how it was different, and also some unique features of the Tantra itself. And finally, Act 3 is on the legacy and reception of the Tantra of the Sun. So Chapter 7 compares the 4 different versions of Tantra of the Sun available on the Buddhist Digital Resource Center to examine how the Tantra may have evolved over time. And Chapter 8 traces the Tantra of the Sun's citational movements throughout Fourfold Heart Essence, Longchenpa's collection that has Heart Essence of the Dakini in it, to show how this collection integrated the Tantra's own message and to what ends. And in this chapter, I created an intertextual heat map, which I'll share the link with you all in a second, And I concluded that about 67% of the citations of Tantra of the Sun found in Fourfold Heart Essence matched to the 113 chapter version of the Tantra that is the basis of my study. Finally, chapter 9, the conclusion, was an experimental comparative piece in juxtaposing Buddhist literature more generally with other theorists and writers. I argue that within Buddhist literature, there exists an ethos of time and embodiment that is fundamentally queer, continually subverting reader expectations of who a Buddha is and what a Buddha taught. I also argue that the work of juxtaposition is a useful exercise for us to engage in order to queer or to defamiliarize our own intellectual categories, and to allow for a refraction of fluidities and an eschewing of fundamentalist language, which I think we sorely need in this moment. And finally, in the appendices, I offer the chapter titles, summaries, along with a full translation and a critical edition of the Tantra of the Sun. So the two digital assets, one is the intertextual heat map, and the second one, which I want to actually share with you today, is the virtual reality prototype that I'm creating based off of chapter 2 of my dissertation. So this VR experience isn't currently in my dissertation, but it's inspired by chapter 2, and I thought this would be an accessible way to share with everyone some ideas in chapter 2. And for the faculty who's here today, I brought VR headsets, so you can try it at the end of the defense. And I invite all my other friends to try the headsets too and the VR app when it's out. Okay. So this is just a quick look at the intertextual heat map, where you can see how Tantra of the Sun, what parts of it are cited throughout the Fourfold Heart Essence. And I have a whole YouTube video tutorial about this, so you can find the details there once I give you the link. So my VR experience is called Playing with Time, Great Perfection, History, and Virtual Reality. There's a saying in this tradition that if a practitioner wishes to generate confidence in the Great Perfection teachings, first they must learn the history. So I thought it would be fitting to share this public-facing project with all of you today. And this VR asset, again, is connected to chapter 2 of my dissertation on heart essence history. It aims to trace the teacher-student relationships for the 3 different transmission streams of heart essence great perfection, Vairochana, Vimalamitra, and Padmasambhava. So the 3rd transmission stream is my particular focus because it is connected to the Tantra of the Sun and the heart essence of the Dakini. And transmission here means the unbroken transmission of Buddhist teachings from a Buddhist master to a student that endures into the present, starting with Samantabhadra and Samantabhadrī, Buddhas who exist prior to concepts of time. There are 2 main functions in the VR. So the user would be able to undergo a journey starting with the first Buddha who exists prior to concepts of time and duality, to different Buddhas and worlds where the teachings have transpired, and finally down to human figures who exist in linear time during definable date or century. And then clicking on each of these figures would lead to a panel that tells us something about each figure's story and how they received their teaching transmission. So Aftab Hafiz, who helped me to create this VR app, designed the panels. We decided to design them like Pecha pages. So I showed you those long rectangular pages before. So we took the basis of this for the panels. 2, a second aim of this project is to replicate the key idea in the Great Perfection that history is not located in the past, but actually collapses into the present moment of encountering. In fact, the word history in Tibetan is often described as history means familiarity with what occurred many years prior. Because it presents those events as if they were being seen right now, it is called a history. So we wanted to animate the 3 lineages such that the user could press a button to collapse the 3 lineages backwards in time or to unfold them forward into time. And this functionality would also mimic a key doctrinal point in the Great Perfection, which is that enlightenment or awakening is not something which has existed in the past or an unforeseeable future, but rather in every moment of realigning with awareness, time collapses, and enlightenment is immediately accessible in this body now. So being able to play with the structure of the three lineage transmissions, and to collapse them backwards and forwards hints at the malleability of time explicitly theorized in the Great Perfection materials that I've been reading. So we're still working on this animation part, so that's not available yet. And I'm going to play you a little bit of what it looks like from the headsets, and you should be able to hear the audio. Welcome to the VR experience. As you can see, starting at the top, we have Samantabhadra and Samantabhadrī, and then the 5 Buddhas. And if we scroll down, first I'm going to just give you a view of the whole app. Looking down, we have the 3 lineages. To the left is Vairochana, in the middle is Vimalamitra, and then further to the right is the Padmasambhava / heart essence of the Dakini lineage. And you'll see here this kind of fading in, fading out Pecha page. So if we click on an entity right here, it will give the description, and I can scroll down and read. It's about the 12 different Buddhas. And then if we want to move up and down the app, let's go further down. Now we see Garab Dorje, Manjushri Mitra, Sri Simha. And if I click on this again, I can scroll and read about Manjushri Mitra. And then I'm going to go further down just to give you a vision. There's Vairochana, Vimalamitra, and Padmasambhava. And we can see on the right-hand side the whole lineage connected with Padmasambhava and the heart essence of the Dakini, starting with Princess Flachampemacel, jumps in time. So there's this big 6th century gap between Princess Pemacel and then Sutrim Dorje or Pema Ledritzel. If we click there, we can learn a little bit about him. And then I've included the sources from my own research, as well as another scholar, Stéphane Arguier, for this particular lineage on the right hand. And we can look up. We can also rotate the whole experience and actually interact from it at different angles. And you see at the top, there's always the 5 Buddhas, and then the Buddha Samantabhadra and Samantabhadrī in union. So that's the entire app. I'll just rotate around so you can experience it in different ways. And that's it. Cool. And then I'll just end. I have 2 more slides. Why VR? It's the definition of history according to the Great Perfection is to make the one learning about history implicated in all past events, completely immersed in the story. So far, VR is the best medium I could think of to create that kind of immersive experience. Accessibility, the Great Perfection histories are very text heavy. And this obviously makes the information hard to absorb. I had to read these like hundreds of times. So I wanted to create something that would allow for a more embodied experience where users could move around the lineages and learn about figures in whatever order they want to. And they always link back to Samantabhadra and Samantabhadrī. And finally, recovery of a largely understudied tradition, especially in the 3rd transmission lineage connected with female figures. We know so little about this early history, which has become foundational for the traditions at present. And I felt that visually representing this 3rd lineage shows how unique the lineage is in terms of how certain figures jump through time, as I showed in the VR app. This is just what we had to draw out beforehand to figure out all the entities. Hopefully the entities can be replaced by 3D models. For now, they all just kind of look like beads on a mala. And finally, I would like to express my deep gratitude. Thank you to my advisor, James Gentry, and my friend and teacher, Khenpo Yeshe, who couldn't make it today. Thank you for bringing my attention to Tantra of the Sun and advising me to translate this. And my committee members, John, Elaine, Sarah, and Besna. And thank you to Bon for sharing the defense. Thank you also to the Kensei Foundation for funding my translation of the Tantra, the Lieberman Fellowship for my 6-year funding, Stanford Center for Spatial and Textual Analysis. I received a fellowship that provided support for my intertextual heat map. And Simon Wiles, who's also a Buddhist studies scholar and does a lot of tech work at Stanford, and Aftab Hafiz helped me to build the intertextual heat map in the VR.